climate tracker on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, Ukraine says that its drones destroyed Russian bombers worth billions of dollars as far away as Siberia in its longest range assault of the war. And all this as it gears up for talks on prospects of a ceasefire. How does this attack affect the on-ground and diplomatic front? We'll get to all the latest on that.
Also on World DNA, a man reportedly set people on fire in Boulder in Colorado, leaving multiple individuals injured as people gathered for a peaceful pro-Israeli demonstration. A suspect is in custody and police are investigating what FBI officials immediately called a targeted terror attack. We'll bring you the latest on that front as well. Let's start with the headlines. This is World DNA.
Ukraine claims it destroyed Russian bombers worth at least $7 billion in Operation Spiderweb. 117 drones deployed in attack on Russian air bases in its most long-range operation of the war.
Video shows drones flying out of a truck parked near Russia's Belaya air base. Ukrainian security officials claim explosive-laden drones were hidden inside trucks that were parked near the Russian bases, and then they were activated remotely, carrying out the attacks.
Russia calls Ukraine's drone strike a terrorist act, claims to have repelled attack on airfields. Defense Ministry admits several aircraft caught fire. Suspects arrested after Ukraine attack on nuclear bombers.
Stay.
At least 6 people wounded in an attack on a rally for Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado. FBI says suspect Mohammad Sabri Soleiman taken into custody after targeting demonstrators with a makeshift flamethrower.
Hamas says Israeli fire killed 31 Palestinians near aid hub in Rafah. Israel denies claims, says did not fire at civilians at or near Gaza aid center.
Bangladesh indicts former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and 2 others on multiple charges, including mass murder. This is in connection with their alleged violent crackdown on student-led protests that rocked Bangladesh last year.
An Indigo flight from Raipur to Delhi experiences turbulence due to a dust storm. Aircraft lands safely at Delhi airport after making many circuits in the air.
Shreyas Iyer leads Punjab Kings to their first IPL final in 11 years with a 5-wicket win over Mumbai Indians. They will face Royal Challengers Bengaluru for the title, guaranteeing a new champion on Tuesday.
Ukraine claims it destroyed Russian bombers worth billions of dollars in a large-scale drone assault on enemy soil as it geared up for talks with Moscow counterparts to explore prospects for a ceasefire.
President Zelensky claimed that Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb destroyed Russian bombers worth at least $7 billion in its most long-range operation of the war yet. Kiev claims that the deep strikes inside Russian territory named Operation Spiderweb was planned for over a year. According to Ukraine's security service, SBU, the operation itself was personally overseen by President Zelensky and executed by SBU chief Vasyl Malyuk using FPV drones.
According to reports quoting a Ukraine security official, the drones were hidden under the roofs of small wooden houses. These mobile homes were then transported to trucks on trucks. Once in place, the roofs were opened remotely, releasing a swarm of drones that struck the airfields simultaneously.
An eyewitness video showed drones flying out of a truck parked near Russia's Belaya Air Base. Ukraine targeted strategic nuclear bombers in Belaya Air Base in Siberia, Ivanovo Air Base northeast of Moscow, and Dyagilevo base that is located south of Moscow, which also came under attack. A huge explosion also rocked the Russian Arctic city of Severomorsk, which is home to Russia's largest fleet of nuclear submarines. Ukraine also hit Olenya Guba naval base in Murmansk region.
In its strikes, Ukraine claims to have struck Russia's strategic bomber fleet, A-50 early warning planes, Tu-95 strategic bombers, and Tu-22 M3 long-range attack aircraft. According to Ukraine, Russia's multiple nuclear bombers were rendered useless and 41 aircraft were damaged or destroyed, reports say, at the Olenya airfield near the Arctic Circle. Drones were launched directly from a truck parked at a gas station.
Russia's defense ministry confirmed on Telegram that several of its military aircraft caught fire, adding that there were no casualties and that several participants had been arrested. In response, the Russian side claimed a strike on a training ground in Ukraine. In a rare admission of its military losses, the Ukrainian army said that the strike had killed a dozen soldiers. The attack led Ukrainian ground forces commander Mikhailo Drapati to announce his resignation.
Now, earlier, Russia had claimed that a blast brought down a road bridge in the Bryansk region bordering Ukraine on Saturday, derailing a passenger train heading to Moscow and killing 7 people. A separate rail bridge in the neighboring Kursk region was blown up hours later in the early hours of Sunday, derailing a freight train and injuring the driver. Authorities did not say who was behind the explosions, but investigators said a criminal inquiry was underway.
Both attacks took place in the Russian territory of Kursk and Bryansk. Kursk is a region where the Ukrainian forces had penetrated through Russian borders last August in 2024. Bryansk borders the Sumy region of Ukraine.
Now, the recent escalation came at a delicate moment. 3 years into the war, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday that he was sending a delegation to Istanbul led by his defense minister Rustem Umerov for talks on Monday with Russian officials. Turkey is hosting the meeting, which was spurred by U.S. President Donald Trump's push for a quick deal to end the 3-year war.
The Russian delegation led by presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky arrived in Istanbul on Sunday evening to take part in talks face-to-face with the Ukrainian side. And to discuss more, we're now being joined by Lieutenant Colonel
Daniel L. Davis. He is a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's begin with these attacks. Now, as reports say, they were prepared for more than a year. Of course, it was expansive. Drones were smuggled and the attack was carried out under President Zelensky's operation. Now, these attacks were so meticulously planned. How do you assess Ukraine, of course, and Russia's capabilities in these attacks? And how does this change the face of the war at this juncture?
Well, first of all, let's just look at the skill that went into conducting these operations. It used a great deal of what's called operational security to keep it silent. I'm sure that they probably had very limited exposure even among the allies, whether that's Great Britain, France, Germany, the United States, even allegedly that we weren't even involved with any of this or didn't even have any knowledge of it beforehand. So that by itself is a real feat. And then the technology that went into having this done with the satellite remotes, with the remote opening of the trucks themselves, the getting them to where they needed to go, absolutely a picture perfect strategic operation on the Ukraine side. That being said, what matters in a war is not individual acts, but how things contribute toward either winning or losing a war. And this is going to have probably no impact at all on the conduct of the war, even depending on how many bombers were actually hit. There's disputes about whether it was 40 or maybe even 9. It's unclear what's accurate, but it was a significant number. The problem is, for Ukraine, Russia has a lot more of them. And the number that they use in any given sortie or attack mission into Ukraine is probably around a dozen, maybe less than that. So there's plenty to replace those, so that won't affect at all the Russian fire that's coming into the Ukraine side. Worse, probably, this all comes the day before the peace talks are supposed to start in Istanbul tomorrow, and this will not play well for the Ukraine side. And if anything, this is going to drive Russia into harder position, and on the battlefield, the Ukraine side is losing. So I'm not sure how this is going to help them long term.
Lieutenant Colonel, you've answered one of the big queries that I had. It was tactical brilliance that the entire world saw in terms of those visuals, but how strategically wise was it? That's something you've addressed in your response. Going into the talks into Istanbul, do you feel that Ukraine is taking the right approach to bring Russia to the negotiating table at this point? Because if history tells us anything, this will only hamper any kind of peace talks which were perhaps on the horizon in Istanbul.
The bottom line to any kind of negotiation, who has the leverage, who has the power to compel the other side to concede to their issues? And there's no question that all of the cards are on the Russian side. When you're talking about air power, air defense, manpower, technological, industrial capacity, etc., all off the charts on the Russian side. The only area where there is parity is in the drone fight right now. And I've talked to people on both sides of the line of contact, and both of them say the same thing, that there's parity with that. But if all the other advantages, and especially manpower advantages, are on the Russian side, and they literally have millions more men from which to draw, a war of attrition can only work against Ukraine. So if you're not willing to come to a negotiated settlement and make some real concessions at these negotiation talks, then their UN ambassador, Nebenzia, in the UN Security Council just a few days ago, clearly and unequivocally said Russia will continue to fight if they don't get the negotiated settlement that they're looking for. So they've been pretty plain about what they're going to do, and I imagine we'll see something like that play out.
Right, and also talking about these talks, U.S.'s role was really evident when they actually told Trump, he was on a phone call with Putin and Zelensky saying that let's come to the table. U.S. played a role there to get these meetings done in Turkey. How do you think U.S. will be reacting to all of this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, frankly, because you had the United States from about the middle of April on talking about how that we could be days away from walking if the two sides don't come together, and the two sides definitely have not come together. They're talking, and that's an important step. You can't have any negotiations if you're not at least talking, so there was benefit of that. But especially with these memorandums that the two sides, these deal sheets they're both supposed to give to each other in Istanbul tomorrow, according to the Associated Press, the deal that the Ukraine side is offering is so far off of the any terms that the Russians could accept, that it's pretty clear that the two sides are moving further apart. They're not moving closer together. So I don't expect any outcome at all from these talks tomorrow, because Russia's deal sheet is probably going to be something that the Ukraine side would never agree to. So I think this is just kind of a pro forma thing, and it's just going to, the fighting is going to continue on.
Lieutenant Colonel, in November 2024, when Ukraine was given that green light to target deep inside Russia, and that time Russia responded with those arresting missiles which rained down like meteors on top of Ukraine. The entire world saw those visuals. Now, within days of those range restrictions being lifted, we've seen this attack from the Ukrainian side deep inside Russia. What kind of a response should one expect from Russia? Because the bear has been poked now very hard.
That's true, and I think that that's the biggest concern that I have from the Ukraine side, is that Russia has demonstrated use of these Oreshnik missiles, and if you have struck strategic targets, and listen, this is some pretty big deal. A lot of these Tu-95 bombers and other variants of the bombers were just parked on the row out in the open on these airfields. That's because the START treaty obligations require them to do so, just like it requires the United States to do so. And if now Russia sees that their strategic bombers are not respected in that, so now then they may move them in violation of that treaty. Likewise, simultaneously, really to get to your heart of your question is, the real question is, because these strategic targets were struck, what will Russia do? It doesn't seem likely to me that they would not strike anything deeper inside of Ukraine. But then again, they may say we're going to continue on with this methodical pressure until we end up buckling the Ukraine army. But I think it's also quite possible that you could see some Oreshniks hit some big high-value targets, maybe even in Kiev in the coming days.
Right, and of course it's very interesting because we picked up that topic of how U.S. has allowed this, and now German Chancellor, he had also allowed that, okay, you can actually go ahead and we're going to allow you to strike deep inside Russia, and this attack happened. Very interesting how all of this happened, but thank you so much for joining on the show and giving your perspective.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, let's move further from here. The US has presented its proposals on its highly anticipated nuclear deal with Iran. Both sides have held 5 rounds of talks so far.
Now, the last one in Rome had ended without an agreement. Reports state that the current proposal document forwarded by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff contains suggestions for the creation of a regional consortium to produce nuclear power for Iran alongside Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. Responding to the U.S.'s proposal, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran will respond in line with the principles of national interest and the rights of people of Iran. In a separate statement, Araghchi said that Iran will not accept dominance of anyone.
They tell us not to enrich because they are worried, but should the Iranian people give up their rights just because others are worried? This is unacceptable to the Iranian people, because it means accepting the domination of others, whether we need enrichment or not, and we do need it.
The U.S. proposal comes at a time when the IAEA has released a report saying Iran is ramping up its uranium enrichment. The IAEA report says Iran now possesses over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, which is close to the 90% purity required for weapons-grade uranium.
But Iran has repeatedly argued that it wants nuclear energy for civilian use. But most nuclear power reactors require uranium to be enriched from 0.7% to 3 to 5%. Now that is way below the current capacity that Tehran has reportedly developed, raising concerns about Tehran's real intentions.
Iran maintains its program is peaceful. Iranian state media has described the IAEA report as politically motivated, containing baseless accusations, and Tehran says it will implement appropriate measures in response to any actions taken against it by the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Now, soon after the IAEA released its report, Israel raised alarm over Tehran's intentions, stating that Iran is determined to acquire nuclear weapons. Israeli Prime Minister issued a statement saying such a level of enrichment exists only in countries actively pursuing nuclear weapons and has no civilian justification whatsoever.
Iran is reportedly yet to develop a weapon that could carry a nuclear warhead, but Israel has repeatedly threatened that it is prepared to launch its own military attack against Iran's nuclear facilities. US President has so far convinced the Israeli Prime Minister to hold back pending the result of the US-Iran negotiations.
Well, more than 30 have been killed, 170 injured after Israeli soldiers fired on people trying to collect food at an aid distribution site in Rafah.
And this is according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Residents and medics and Israeli soldiers fired from the ground. They fired from the ground at a crane nearby that overlooked the area, and a tank opened fire at thousands of people who were en route to the aid distribution site. However, Israel denies this.
In a statement, Israel's military said an initial inquiry indicated that soldiers had not fired on civilians while they were near or within the aid distribution site.
Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, which is a US-based entity backed by the US and Israeli governments, also said that food was handed out without incident and there were no deaths or injuries. GHF even released an undated video to support its statement. It shows dozens of people gathering around piles of boxes. Now, the Israeli military released a drone footage it said was shot on Sunday in the southern city of Khan Yunis, showing that what it said were armed masked men firing at civilians trying to collect aid. The IDF accused Hamas of doing everything in its power to prevent the successful distribution of food in Gaza.
Now, only limited amounts of aid have entered Gaza since Israel eased its total blockade that began in March. GHF began providing aid in Gaza last month, bypassing traditional aid groups, and has widely been criticized by the international community, with the UN saying its aid plans would only foment forced relocation of Palestinians in Gaza and more violence. The United Nations and the World Food Programme have recently reported looting of some supplies, including by gunmen. On Friday, a spokesperson for the UN humanitarian agency called Gaza the hungriest place on earth.
International NGO Freedom Flotilla Coalition FFC left the Italian port of Catania on Sunday to travel to Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid after a previous attempt failed due to a drone attack on its ship in the Mediterranean. The crew volunteers, which includes climate activist Greta Thunberg, set sail on the Madeleine carrying what the group called limited amounts, though symbolic, relief supplies.
Now, nearly 20 months into the war, negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release deal have failed to produce a breakthrough. Since the last brief truce collapsed in March, Israel has intensified its operations to destroy Hamas.
In the latest, the Palestinian group has said that it is ready to immediately hold a fresh round of negotiations to reach an agreement on the points of contention. And this is after its response to a US-backed proposal, which became a subject of criticism. US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff called it totally unacceptable, an assessment which was later echoed by Israel as well.
Qatar and Egypt, which have served as mediators in ceasefire talks throughout the war, have emphasized the importance of intensifying efforts to overcome the obstacles facing the negotiations.
At least 6 people were injured after a man threw incendiary devices into a crowd in the US state of Colorado.
Now, the attack in Boulder came during a demonstration to remember the Israeli hostages who remain in Gaza, and the suspect, identified as 45-year-old Mohammed Soliman, has been taken into custody. The FBI and police have launched an investigation into the attack.
Stay.
Local media cited eyewitnesses describing a man throwing something resembling a homemade Molotov cocktail at the group. In one video, apparently, of the attack, a shirtless man holding clear spray bottles in his hands is seen pacing as the grass in front of him burns.
The Boulder Police Chief Steve Redfern told reporters that initial callers indicated that there was a man with a weapon and that people were being set on fire, adding that police arrived very quickly.
A suspect was pointed out to our officers on the scene. Our officers immediately encountered that suspect who was taken into custody without incident. That suspect, who I'm not able to ID at this time, was taken to the hospital with some minor injuries as well.
FBI Special Agent in charge of the Denver field office, Mark McCulloch, said that there were 6 victims aged between 67 and 88 years old who were transported to hospitals. McCulloch named the suspect as Mohammed Soleiman, aged 45. Soleiman was hospitalized shortly after the attack.
This attack happened at a regularly scheduled weekly peaceful event. Witnesses are reporting that the subject used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell "Free Palestine" during the attack. The subject has been identified as Mohammed Sabri Solomon, and he's 45 years old. The FBI is processing the crime scene and the subject vehicle and interviewing key witnesses.
FBI Director Kash Patel called it a targeted terror attack, saying that the agency was aware of and fully investigating the incident.
Israel's ambassador to the United Nations in New York voiced outrage at the attack. He said in a statement, "Terrorism against Jews does not stop at the Gaza border. It is already burning the streets of America," quote unquote. And this incident weeks after 2 people working with the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. were shot dead by an attacker.
And well, it's now time for a quick short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. Jyotsna and I will be back with you on the other side. When we come back, India continues to expand its global outreach post-Operation Sindoor. We'll bring you a full report on that. A 9-member all-party delegation led by the Bharatiya Janata Party MP Ravi Shankar Prasad has arrived in the United Kingdom.
Also on the other side, Bangladesh indicts former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on multiple charges, including mass murder. This in connection with student-led protests that rocked the nation last year. We'll get you all the details on that on the other side. Stay tuned.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with Jyotsna. I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
Hamas says it is prepared to immediately begin a new round of indirect negotiations on remaining points of contention on a U.S.-backed ceasefire and hostage deal proposal. This after Washington calls Hamas' earlier response to the proposal unacceptable.
Stay.
At least 6 people wounded in an attack on a rally for Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado. FBI says suspect Mohammad Sabri Suleiman taken into custody after targeting demonstrators with a makeshift flamethrower.
Ukraine claims it destroyed Russian bombers worth at least $7 billion in Operation Spiderweb. 117 drones deployed an attack on Russian air bases in its most long-range operation of the war.
Video shows drones flying out of a truck parked near Russia's Belaya airbase. Ukrainian security officials claim explosive-laden drones were hidden inside trucks that were parked near the Russian bases, and then they were activated remotely.
Bangladesh indicts former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and 2 others on multiple charges, including mass murder. This in connection with their alleged violent crackdown on student-led protests that rocked the nation last year.
COVID-19 cases continue to rise in India. Number of active cases reaches 3,758. Health Ministry says 360 new infections recorded in 24 hours.
An Indigo flight from Jaipur to Delhi experiences turbulence due to a dust storm. Aircraft lands safely at Delhi airport after making many circuits in the air.
Asian shares fell and US futures dipped after President Trump announced higher tariffs on metals, intensifying tensions with China. Gold rose as investors fled to safe havens.
Shreyas Iyer leads Punjab Kings to their first IPL final in 11 years with a 5-wicket win over Mumbai Indians. They will face Royal Challengers Bengaluru for the title, guaranteeing a new champion on Tuesday. India continues to see a surge in COVID-19 cases. As per data shared by the Health Ministry, there are now over 3,700 active cases in the country.
And these are those cases that have been reported. While 28 deaths have been attributed to the infection since January earlier this year, a total of 363 new COVID cases were recorded in the last 24 hours, with Kerala, Maharashtra and Delhi emerging as the worst affected. At least 2 deaths were reported in the past 24 hours. In Karnataka, a 63-year-old man who was diagnosed with pulmonary TB tested positive for COVID-19 and died. In Kerala, a 24-year-old woman with COVID-19, hypertension and chronic liver disease also succumbed.
As per Union Health Ministry data, West Bengal reported 82 new infections, followed by Kerala with 64, Delhi with 61 and Gujarat with 55 new cases. The northeastern state of Sikkim has also reported 3 new cases.
The overall rise in new cases has been sharp. From just 257 active cases on the 22nd of May, the count jumped to 1,010 by the 26th of May. With 1,400 active cases, Kerala is among the worst hit states. It has stepped up its surveillance of influenza-like illnesses and severe acute respiratory infections. Another state that has seen a consistent rise is Maharashtra. It has now reported 18 new COVID-19 cases, bringing the total number of infections recorded this year to 485, according to May 2025 classifications by the World Health Organization. Subvariants LF.7 and NB.1.8.1 are categorized as variants under monitoring. Indian health officials have reassured people not to panic, as all medical infrastructure is in place. Experts have advised keeping symptoms like nasal congestion, nausea, gut problems and throat pain under observation. And torrential rains and untimely monsoons have claimed over 100 lives in India over the last few days.
Now, India's northeast has reported 32 deaths due to landslides and floods in the past 24 hours. Assam, Manipur, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim have been severely struck, with villages inundated, houses collapsed and people missing.
In Assam, 9 people lost their lives due to the flooding in the upper reaches of the state. 5 people died in state capital Guwahati after a landslide hit them. The state's meteorological department issued a red alert for multiple districts, warning of a severe flood situation as water levels in 10 major rivers crossed the danger mark.
Meanwhile, incessant rains in the northeastern state of Manipur affected 3,802 people and damaged about 883 homes in floods and landslides over the last 48 hours. Security personnel evacuated 800 people from submerged localities in the state's capital, Imphal.
In Sikkim, 1,500 tourists were stranded after landslides blocked key roads. A search for the missing family of 8 whose vehicle plunged into the Tiesta River has been halted, while in Tripura, at least 1,300 families were forced to seek refuge in relief camps as the Howrah Bridge swelled above danger mark.
And while the northeast battles the flood crisis, sporadic spells of rainfall and dust storms swept through swathes of the national capital, Delhi, disrupting normal movement and blocking visibility. In southern India's Karnataka, 71 people lost their lives due to excessive pre-monsoon showers, with 8 deaths in the past 48 hours in Karnataka's Dakshin Kannada district. Now, authorities are reporting the state recorded the highest pre-rainfall monsoon showers in the past 125 years and 197% higher.
Spells of heavy rain also pelted parts of urban Maharashtra, with Pune witnessing one of the worst instances of waterlogging this week. The entire state recorded an intense spell, 10 times extra rainfall than usual this month, as states, especially in the northeastern parts of India, grapple with the situation. India's Home Minister Amit Shah dialed state leaders and assured them of the centre's unwavering support in addressing the situation. India continues to expand its global outreach post-Operation Sindoor.
A 9-member all-party delegation led by Bharatiya Janata Party MP Ravi Shankar Prasad is in the UK. While addressing the Indian diaspora in London, Ravi Shankar Prasad stressed that Pakistan was not a democratic country, adding that Pakistan's armed forces have made the country for themselves and are unelected and unaccountable.
He singled out Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, Field Marshal Asim Munir, who he said was defeated in the field but promoted to Field Marshal, and went on to draw parallels between him and former military rulers like Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Zia-ul Haq and General Musharraf.
There, the Pakistan armed forces have made a country, Pakistan, for themselves. Unelectable, not accountable, not popular sanction, but they seize power. Ayub Khan, Field Marshal for 10 years. Mr. Yahya Khan for 7.5 years. Mr. Zia-ul Haq for 11 years. General Musharraf for 9 years. Now you have Munir, general, who was defeated in the field but became a field marshal. That is the whole scenario.
Now, later in the day, the delegation held a meeting with UK's Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel and her team to share India's firm resolve in countering cross-border terrorism.
The delegation, led by BJP MP and senior parliamentarian Bejant Panda, is in Algeria. Mohammad Khon, who is the chairman of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation and the National Community Abroad in the Algerian parliament, hosted a formal dinner in honor of the delegation.
In Liberia, the delegation led by Shiv Sena MP Shrikant Shinde addressed issues related to global terrorism. Shinde highlighted how India is the first country to spread the message of peace across the world through a delegation against terrorism, something he lauded Prime Minister Narendra Modi for. Now, tensions are simmering in Kathmandu as calls to reinstate monarchy gets louder.
On Sunday, Nepal's former Home Minister Kamal Thapa and scores of protesters were arrested for entering a restricted area during their agitation. On the fourth day of protests, pro-monarchy groups, including the RRP and RPP Nepal, clashed with authorities in Kathmandu.
The protest being led by Rashtriya Prajatantra Party's president, Rajendra Lingden, a strong pro-monarchy advocate, then attempted to breach the security barricade and march towards the official residence of the Prime Minister, leading to clashes with police. And amid this, RPP Nepal chief and former Home Minister Kamal Thapa was detained for violating the restricted zone.
RPP MP Rajendra Lingden has now warned that if Kamal Thapa is not released, monarchists will launch a special protest and shut down the Kathmandu Valley. Pro-monarchist groups like the RPP and RRP Nepal have been launching protests since May 29th. Rallies calling for the restoration of the monarchy and a Hindu state have only increased.
Now, they have been fueled by dissatisfaction over political instability, corruption, and slow economic development. Most protests remained peaceful until yesterday's that saw multiple detentions.
The International Crimes Tribunal in Bangladesh has ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on charges of mass murder.
Now, Bangladesh's state-owned television network broadcast the proceedings live, making it the first such instance in the country's history. As the trial opened, Bangladesh prosecutor Tajul Islam submitted a complaint to the tribunal accusing the deposed Prime Minister of orchestrating a systemic attack on student protests against her government.
Today, the charges against Sheikh Hasina, Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal and Chowdhury Abdullah Al Mamun have been taken into cognizance for the crimes against humanity committed in July-August 2024 in Bangladesh. 5 charges have been brought against them, and those charges have been taken into cognizance. We presented detailed evidences in the court. as you and the whole nation saw that live on television.
Last year, Islam alleged that Hasina unleashed all law enforcement agencies and her armed party members to crush the uprising. Alongside Hasina, the case also includes ex-police chief Chaudhry Abdullah Al-Mamun, who is in custody, and former Interior Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal.
Now, Sheikh Hasina faces multiple cases in Bangladesh courts, as she could face the death penalty on the charges brought against her. Earlier in February, the three-judge ICTBD had ordered the investigation against Hasina to be completed by April. On August 5th last year, a mass uprising broke out against the Hasina regime. 3 days later, she resigned and left the country. Muhammad Yunus was sworn in as the head of Bangladesh's interim government.
The ICTBD had earlier issued an arrest warrant against Hasina as the interim government led by Muhammad Yunus sought her repatriation from India. New Delhi acknowledged receiving the diplomatic communication but refrained from commenting on it.
Here's a question. Is this the end of tariffs, or will last week's court drama mean they're going to go even higher?
Well, it's a tariff hokey with Trump imposing high tariffs and then pausing them until a future date. That's customary with Trump actions. There is a shock and awe condition, and then there is a pullback from it. One thing is clear, Trump is using tariffs as a negotiating tool. In this next report, we decode what will go in and out next. Take a look.
Last week's bombshell verdict from a New York trade court ruled a large chunk of President Trump's tariffs illegal. The ruling certainly opens the door to a whole range of new possibilities. While the Trump administration got temporary relief from an appeals court, the ruling raised several questions about Trump's ability to sustain his tariff rhetoric. Does this offer the administration the political cover it quietly needs to de-escalate tariffs and limit the economic fallout, or does it do the opposite? Suppose the likes of the EU and China conclude the US can't sustain these tariffs for much longer. They can become more reluctant to give ground in negotiations, triggering the president to raise tariffs even further. Both of these arguments have done the rounds this week, but both sound a little too much like 4D chess. The truth is, nobody really knows what will happen next. However, markets are concluding that the legal drama does not change the basic tariff story. The U.S. administration has bet the political house on reshoring activity. Tariff revenue helps broader efforts to convince the Senate to pass Trump's tax bill in its current form. The average tariff the U.S. is now charging across all its imports is 13%. Now that is up from just 2.5% before the president's inauguration. 8 percentage points of that 13% are made up of tariffs that are at risk from the court ruling. That includes the 10% baseline across the majority of America's trading partners. But one of the two things seems likely. Either the Supreme Court overturns the existing rule, in which case nothing changes, or the Trump administration rebuild these tariffs through other means. Talks with both the EU and China are not exactly going well, so tariffs probably aren't going down and they might go up. All this hockey-cocking just ramps up the uncertainty that businesses are having to confront. Business Bureau Report, WION World is One.
McLaren continued their early dominance in the Formula One season.
Oscar Piastri led Lando Norris to a 1-2 finish at the Spanish Grand Prix. The race was full of drama as world champion Max Verstappen was left on the brink of a ban after a clash with George Russell.
Piastri started on pole and maintained his lead, but Norris quickly dropped behind Verstappen to third. Norris, who has won 2 races this year, reclaimed second place by overtaking the reigning champion on lap 13. The Briton Though couldn't close in to challenge his McLaren teammate Piastri, Red Bull had opted for a different strategy, this time placing Verstappen on a 3-stop race compared to the more conventional 2-stop plan. A safety car was deployed with 11 laps remaining after Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes became stranded in the gravel. That's when Verstappen's race unraveled. Red Bull fitted the only tyres they had left, new hard compounds, while those around him switched to faster soft tyres. The Dutchman collided with Charles Leclerc and then twice with George Russell after the safety car restart with 6 laps to go.
The stewards handed Verstappen a 10-second post-race penalty for the clash with Russell, dropping him from 5th to 10th. Verstappen was also given 3 penalty points, taking his tally to 11. One more before the end of June will result in a 1-race ban. Meanwhile, Piastri is now 10 points clear of Norris in the Drivers' Championship after claiming his 5th victory in 9 races.
I feel like when I needed to push and unleash the pace, then I could do a good job. And yeah, obviously the safety car at the end, I feel like I managed that pretty well, and then I knew I had the pace, so had a good weekend.
Look, that's how Max goes racing. As I said, he was in P4, I was in P5, I ended up P4, he ended up P10. So from my side, glad that I managed to finish the race. Not really sure what he was thinking, because he cost himself and his team a lot of points, so no conversation really required.
The Paris Saint-Germain held a victory parade in the French capital on Sunday, a day after beating Inter Milan 5-0 to win the Champions League, completing the treble.
Luis Enrique and his players went on an open-top bus past the Triumph and along the Champs-Élysées Avenue, with thousands of fans lining the streets to join in the celebrations. The bus stopped in front of Triumph for a photo opportunity as pyrotechnics were set off behind the players, with the colours red, white and blue drifting through the air.
Now the parade comes after 2 people died and over 192 got injured in the aftermath of Paris Saint-Germain's Champions League success, as celebrations descended into the clashes with the police. 559 people also got arrested by the French police.
According to the French Interior Ministry, a 17-year-old was stabbed to death in the southwestern town during a gathering to celebrate Parisians' victory, while a woman riding a scooter died after she was hit by a car in the southwest of Paris. The French Interior Ministry added that 491 people were arrested in the capital itself. Flares, fireworks, torched cars and smashed bus shelters marked a chaotic night in France.
We're really not in favor of that violence on Champs-Élysées. We're a family, I even have children, and I wasn't able to bring them to the Champs-Élysées last night because you never know. So sure, we're not very proud of some people who are just looking for that.
Authorities had anticipated wild celebrations in the city, and to manage the situation, over 5,000 police officers were deployed. And as expected, the celebration spiraled out of control in the French capital. Police used tear gas after festivities on the Champs-Élysées turned chaotic. Security has been tightened around the iconic Paris Avenue. A day after the police incident, they used metal security barriers and vehicles to block off the Champs-Élysées and surrounding streets, while fans were already gathering in the area to catch a glimpse of the soccer stars. And while Taylor Swift has successfully acquired her entire music catalog,
a move which has been lauded by her celebrity friends, the pop icon announced the news via her official website, stating, and I quote her here, "All of the music I've ever made now belongs to me," quote unquote. Swift confirmed she purchased her Big Machine Records catalog from its recent owner, private equity firm Shamrock Capital. While the financial details remain undisclosed, Shamrock Capital expressed their delight, stating, "We are thrilled with this outcome and are so happy for Taylor."
Taylor Swift's celebrity friends, including Selena Gomez, Kesha, and Jack Antonoff, have publicly congratulated Swift on this significant move. Now, this landmark achievement follows Swift's multi-year effort to regain control of her early recordings, and this began after music manager Scooter Braun's controversial purchase and subsequent sale of her master recordings.
Swift has been systematically re-recording her first 6 albums, releasing them as Taylor's version, alongside new from the vault tracks and engaging visuals. To date, 4 re-recorded albums have been released, with 1989 Taylor's version arriving in October 2023. Shortly after Speak Now, Taylor's version in 2023, Swift also set a new record for the female artist with the most #1 albums in history. While fans speculated Reputation, Taylor's version would be next due to recent song teasers in various media, Swift released she hasn't even re-recorded a quarter of her catalogue. She did, however, confirm her self-titled debut album is fully re-recorded and sounds now like she wants.
Now, both this and Reputation, Taylor's version, are set to re-emerge when the time is right. All right, with that, we'll be calling a wrap to World DNA. But before we wrap up this bulletin, let's take a look at all the climate stories making headlines across the world. Do stay tuned. News and updates follow on the other side.